everyone, and welcome. My name is Derrick Fazendin, but more importantly, I'm here with Christine Duque here at California Talk Studio, the author of Walking in My Shoes, Shattering Glass Ceilings in Corporate America. We've got a lot of great stuff to talk about today, including but not limited to your book. But Christine, first of all, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think we've got only limited amount of time, but we could go on for probably hours talking about your background, your book, all that stuff. But let's just dive right into it. Christine, I think your book's been out for a couple weeks now, depending on when you're watching this. Pretty successful launch. Give us the background and inspiration behind your book.
Yeah, so the book really I sat on the first 3 chapters for a year. I went through a series of kind of discriminatory practices on my way up from a promotion from a particular company. And honestly, when I was going through that, I just thought that I was going through it. It was a personal attack on me. I never really understood what systemic racism really looked like and what those biases look like. And I think as I started to dig into it and people were starting to share with me what the statistics are, there was one statistic that weighed heavily in my head. 80% of Asian women fall off the corporate executive track.
That's a high number.
It's a high number. And then, throw in a couple other statistics, right? Where Asians are supposed to be 16% of the immigrant population in the United States. And we're the most educated and also the most profitable. And then we're also 60% of the world's population. But then when you look at the S&P 500, 1.5% of the CEOs of the S&P 500 is an Asian person. The statistics don't make any sense, yet alone to even basically what the stats were saying, as an Asian woman to climb up the corporate executive track, it almost seemed impossible. And no one was really talking about it. No one really was, looking at these statistics a little bit more. And it weighed really heavily on me at the time. And I think the intention for me was to really look at that statistic and have that conversation. Why do 80% of Asian women fall off the corporate executive track? And I guess the intention of where I wanted the book to go to where the book that was published are 2 different stories. It does still address a lot of the discrimination, a lot of the stories of Asian women in corporate America. But there's also a time period around what corporate America is post-pandemic and what that means, not just for Asian women, but women in general and members of the BIPOC community and other diverse populations as well, right? Of themes around return to work. What does that balance look like? Going back into the office, not going back into the office, the flexibility that people are really looking for in their lives to be able to, manage life and work. And also just other themes just around what does it mean to bring your authentic self to work? And so I think those are a lot of questions that I was answering or asking, rather. I don't have all the answers, but dimensions that I was really trying to pull out there, right? And have those conversations because I think that you can't go back from, pre-pandemic. I think the pandemic taught us to come back in our humanity. So what does that balance really look like? And I think that really is important.
The world's different in so many different ways.
Correct. Yeah. People always talk about what does work-life balance, look like. And I think that the pandemic really showed it's not about where work stops and starts and then life kind of happens. And that was definitely my story where, I thought that I lived to work instead of really kind of living life. And the pandemic really shook me to my core. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted this conversation out there. Because I think when I was writing the first few chapters before it got published and the people who were reading it were like, this is a conversation for now because other people are feeling this way. And I think that corporate America or the workplace is really struggling with the balance between innovation and technology and productivity and the human touch and human values.
Well, you bring up a great point, but before we dive any further, let's dive a little more into your background. Why don't you tell the people, you've worked for some pretty prominent companies, some Fortune 50, 100, 500 companies. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit more of your background, and that can kind of set the scene and why you, for lack of a better term, really know what you're talking about in terms of the subject matter of your book.
Absolutely. So First of all, I have a very unique background. 27 years of my life and my career, probably a little bit more now, I can claim as a performing artist. So I started performing when I was 5 as an actress and, studied opera and vocal studies and really thought that was the direction of where my life was going to go. Then life happens, went through a divorce, thought I had a career-ending, injury with my vocal cords, and had to answer the question what it looks like to go into corporate America. So I started my career in marketing, in experiential marketing, at the very early onset of that, and kind of grew up in 15 years of real agency experience in the big agencies. I think my agency is now part of Aegis Dentsu. There's been so many mergers and acquisitions, but that really kind of the heart of it. And then transitioned my career into working in consultancies when consultancies were starting to answer the question around customer experience or user experience as they started the tech. So I actually enabled marketing consultancies at companies like Accenture, Deloitte, and IBM. And all my clients have been either Fortune 50, 100, 500. So I've really been at the forefront of driving innovation for these consultancies as well as, enterprise companies, within, the Global 500 listing.
Yeah. So it's kind of impressive. I would say, not a bad background there, yeah. But I think you talk about your experience though, right? And I think obviously you have the credentials and you've gotten further than a lot of people hope to go in their entire career, but it wasn't without, your particular challenges that you've started to talk about already. I'm going to ask you to open up to our audience a little bit now. And what was kind of that turning point for you where how did the idea of the book actually kind of come to fruition? Because I know this story. It's a very interesting one that you've told me off camera. But how did you get to the idea of writing a book? Who gave you that idea? And how did it kind of come to fruition?
So when I was going through that particular period of the discrimination, right, and I was really doing a whole lot of research because to me, it's like, there's a problem. I want to know how to fix it. And so I go into the research and try to figure out. And then I started talking to other people. And then a lot of it was also based on my observations of what were happening in my clients and also within the companies I was. So I wrote a small article, actually. The intention was to write an article and to publish it. There was actually a publisher was going to publish the article around International Women's Day to really shine a light on the pieces that I had. And because of the fact that I was potentially going to go through litigation in a class action lawsuit, my lawyers pulled the article and told me to pause. But as I distributed that small article to my, inner circle, just to let them know what I was grappling with, what I was struggling with, there was this idea like, hey, this article is brilliant. You need to turn this into the book. And so the article actually laid the foundation for the first 3 chapters of the book that really lays out the framework and the foundations around, systemic racism and why. And then it stopped there because I wasn't sure where the story was going to go afterwards. So I sat on the first 3 chapters for 1 year because I didn't know where to go. Yeah. And I knew that at some point I would have to talk about the discrimination, what happened, and a little bit of it. But it was so painful and I really didn't know how to articulate it. And
still so fresh. So fresh,
right?
You're still going through all this at that time.
Correct.
So it's not exactly the most, positive topic to not only live, but have to now write down.
Right. And it's not a happily ever after story, right? It's like you go into the next phase of your career and these systemic biases and discrimination continue to persist and exist. And it's something that you grapple with on a daily basis. It's not like, okay, it's not a happily ever after story. It's my life. And then fast forward, a year goes by and I get sick.
As a lot of people have been during that time. I mean, you're only working 22 hours a day. Of course you're going to get sick.
I got sick and it was Christmas. Actually, I got sick Christmas Day and it was kind of one of those things. Okay, great. I'm down for the count. And it was a combination of bronchitis that turned into a sinus infection and I'm asthmatic. So I just couldn't breathe. I couldn't lie down. And I think RSA was also like a thing that was going on. So there was a shortage of asthma inhalers in the country. And my medication was in back order for 2 weeks. This is the true story. And so I couldn't sleep. I couldn't lie down. I got sick of Netflix and couldn't find anything. So I grabbed my laptop and apparently I wrote the rest of the book, chapter 4 through 4, 5, 6, and 8.
All right,
like,
everyone. So next time you get the flu or a little cold, just sit down and write a book. It's that easy.
Just sit down and write a book. Yeah. And then I started sending kind of like chapters to a couple of friends and people, and are like, hey, I'm writing, like resuscitated the book. And one of the people who started sending the chapters along to other people. And the next thing I know, like I'm talking to publishers. So here's the timeline, guys. It's really quick. December 25th to January 10th, right? And
I'd say that's about 2 weeks.
That's about 2 weeks, right? I signed with the publisher on the 12th. And my asthma inhaler didn't come until the 15th.
You know what? But now that I've gotten the pleasure of knowing you, I'm just going to steal one of your lines. It's Christine's speed.
The speed of Christine,
right? The speed of Christine. And so, I finally understand what that means now.
Yeah. And then honestly, when I signed with the publisher, I still had one chapter to write. Chapter 7 was the last chapter that I wrote because I thought chapter 7 was going to be the easiest one, which I already knew that I wanted to say, hey, for the next generation who's picking up this book, what is the advice or what insights can I give them from everything that I've learned? I thought that was going to be the easiest chapter, and it was the hardest chapter to write. And that was the last chapter that I wrote. And I think, most people who publish a book, it's like a year out before they publish that book or a biography, and so much life has happened. That's not the same as me. Like, I would say chapter 8 and everything that was going at chapter 8 and what I've written into chapter 8 were like literal epiphanies of me actually resolving a lot of themes and a lot of personal things in my life at that exact moment.
And that's what I was going to say. And I think something that you said earlier really stuck with me. It's just like, this is not a happily ever ending story. One, because this is my life and it's my life and it's still happening. You're still going through all this stuff while you're writing the book, still dealing with some of it today.
Right. So you and I are talking about this, like the book's been out a month-ish now.
Month-ish.
Yep. And I think if you talk to me like before all of the interviews before, like you have me giggling because I'm so nervous. And honestly, like to put myself out there, to have the realization this was coming out and this was such a personal story, to have the courage to put my vulnerability out there was terrifying. I think now that the book is out and we're talking a month out and people are coming back, what I really intended to do was to drive conversation and awareness, which I'm still doing, and I'm really glad. But I think, having people really come up to me and say, hey, the story is resonating. Thank you for writing this, and just having the courage to lend a voice and be there. That feels really, really good. But, there's also still a little bit of me is like, oh my gosh, my story's out there. you know?
And it's crazy, right? I think what you just touched on is super important, because I think your story has resonated with so many people. Well, on one hand, that's incredible, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's like, the fact that it's resonated with so many people is exactly the reason you had to write something like this. This was something you had to do when it came down to it. I know we've talked kind of off camera about how you had a couple of people tell you like, no, you really don't have a choice. You have to write this story.
Right.
Right. So let's talk about the metaphors that you use now. Yeah. Let's dive in a little bit with the shoes. Talk to me about the shoes. You've got a great sense of fashion. You've woven that in here. Talk to me about what those represent.
So the shoes actually came out of a conversation. It was just me just sassing it up with a friend about the fact that I was, like making a transition. I was like, and I think I was just like, this is me walking away in Louboutins. That was the exact line that I used. And I was like, and I kind of like paused. This is even before I had the idea of the book or anything else. I'm like, that would be a great chapter of the book. Walking away in Louboutins and then ascending in Dior's and then sticking it in stilettos. Like that was like the progression of my mind, because the Dior thing was like, Dior's the CD, the brand and all that stuff. And I was like sticking it stilettos. Like those were the three things. And I kind of just wrote it aside. I was like, that would be really, really cool. And then I kind of came back and to look at the chapters and I was like, what if I made every chapter a shoe? And I really started to really think about that. And it's not that just like it worked. I just realized that there was something about shoes and women and kind of the relatability around that kind of resonated. And I was just like, how did you come up with that? I was like, I'm not really sure. I kind of made it work. And I was, thinking a lot about shoes. And really try to come up with the right shoe that really kind of resonated with that chapter and could really capture that moment, like the point shoes. And I think what was cool about it too is that actually the shoes are so much about me and my journey. So like, I'm pretty sure if another writer decided to do this, they wouldn't have started with point shoes because they don't have that relationship with point shoes. But each of the shoes in the chapter actually have some resonance with me. And what was also surprising was like, it was supposed to be sticking in stilettos for the last chapter. And it's not. It's grounding in bare feet. And it's like throwing out all the shoes. And I realized that shoes also has its own personality, its own mask. And then, you know, grounding in bare feet in the sand. It's the California Christine.
You stole my line. Dang it. I was going to say, you've been in California a little too long now. Well, not too long. I mean,
right.
It's an easy place to fall in love with.
Yeah.
But, yeah, just in case the audience needs a reminder, Walk Into My Shoes, Shattering Glass Ceilings in Corporate America, available on Amazon. But you can click the link below. It's going to be available, I think, in some stores.
Actually, it's available in Amazon, Barnes & Noble, ebook, and all print, hardcover and paperback. And there is also a audiobook, which I narrate. On Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. So all of it is available. There's global distribution for the book. So I would suggest that if you're watching this, go Google search the book, and all of the listings should come up as well.
And I'll tell you what, if you're watching this, I know you're going to love the audiobook because you might be in your car commuting right now. You're probably watching this on your tablet, phone, computer. You can do the same thing with your book. There's no excuse. If you don't like to read, you can still get the insight. So
I recorded the book in my closet, just so you guys know.
Wow, you're really giving the insight. You didn't record it in here, huh?
No, I mean, because I was, recording it in like really odd hours, and unbeknownst to people, right? Most professional voice actors actually record their stuff in their closet.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. The tip about the closet came from a friend of mine who lives in New York, who's a professional voice actor. He said, do it in your closet because you have the clothes that are there that are going to stop the sound. Add a couple of things. You need a good microphone, and that's it. So I was like, and he was laughing because apparently my closet had a chair and a table. And he was like, I'm in New York City, remember? My closet is stand only.
Right. Your closet is your entire apartment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the size of some closets, depending on where you live in New York. Yeah.
So poetic, maybe, that I'm recording this book in my closet and looking at my shoes and my clothes. So
very true. You had the subject of your book and all the props right there. There. Yeah. Oh, that's too funny. Well, again, I mean, shout out to California Talk Studio, where we are recording this episode. They've got a wonderful facility. But let's just you've kind of talked about the book. Obviously, you've talked a little bit about what inspired you to write the book, but there's probably people watching this to this point saying, you know what, I relate, unfortunately, to a lot of what Christine is talking about right now. And I've got a job. I've got maybe a boss that's not treating me correctly at my current job. Well, I don't know what to do. Everybody's situation is so unique, right? Can you maybe share like a situation, maybe that happened that you felt was unfair kind of in your corporate workplace? You don't have to name the corporation or anything like that, but and kind of how you dealt with it?
I mean, there's so many examples in the book of what that is. I think the whole point of it as well is like, even in the book, and, I've also wiped out my entire work history so no one can guess when and where it happened, because it doesn't matter where it happened. The whole point is that these things happen all the time. And it could just be as simple as, making really weird comments about, your hair, the way that you look, your height, certain features that are part of your ethnicity. That's definitely a little bit of that, or simple acts of being excluded, right? Because there's a clique or there's a boys club that happens all the time in corporate America where, conscious or not conscious, it happens all the time. And so I think that those are, whether you think of them as, a personal attack, which is really what I thought it was at the start, or like, really understanding that this is like blatant racism or blatant exclusion because it's systemic, these things happen all the time. And so, one of the things, even the number of stories, right? Because the book is not just about me. It's about the stories of everyone else that have told about me, like where I'm looking at the younger generation and say, hey, I am the only Asian woman, or the only, not even Asian woman, the only person of color on my team or in my company. And, and we have a social media support group for that I met with other people within the same industry because we found ourselves being the only one. The fact that that is still really common, especially in this day and age where we've got globalization and even living in the United States being the melting pot that it is, or even in Europe, to be singled out as the one or one of the few, whether it is racially driven or gender, it's tough, right? Like it's a really tough position to be in, being one or one of the few, and there are consequences on really both sides. And I think it's awareness and representation on all aspects of it, and that's really what the book also stands for. And I'm telling this through the lens of what I understand as me being an Asian woman and my history.
Yeah. How long did it take? Because I'm sure writing the book helped with this, but when these things first started happening to you, when you first started your career, did any part of you just go, what am I doing wrong? What can I do better? And if so, I assume the answer is yes. Yeah. When did you finally get to a point where you're like, this isn't on me? This is a societal thing, and this is something we have to change. I
mean, the thing about me is that I'm always wanting to constantly improve myself and be the best version of myself possible. And so the first thing is, well, what can I do to improve myself? What aspects of my leadership style or myself can I be better so that I am better? And take some of the feedback that I was getting, right? To be better, right? To really show up better. It wasn't until I was talking to, in that particular time, and I talk about this in the book, there were 5 of us people of color that were attached to this particular department in this company. And all of us have gone through the promotional cycle 3 years in a row. And we've seen throughout our time there other peers of color either leave the firm or get passed up. And so now that it was our time and it was the 3rd year in a row, and then we all kind of got on the call and just realized that none of us are going to make it. It was kind of a really stark reality of hey, guys, did we ever really pause to think that it's not us, and the fact that there's only 5 of us and none of us are getting represented 3 years in a row, that this is a systemic thing. And, and so we actually got legal counsel individually and as well as a group for lawyers to really take a look at our statistics, at our performance, and all the documentation that we had. And that was the first time I actually kind of realized it was, oh my gosh, this is really a thing. That was the aha moment for me. And I think the other colleagues that I had that were there, some were African-American, et cetera, they were just kind of well, here we go again, right? There was a little bit sense in, and I felt like I was late to the race game. I really was wait, this is really a thing. Cause I always wanted to really believe in the meritocracy, and I always look at the goodness of people on the good side, but I never really understood this kind of blatant kind of systemic thing. And then that was the reason why the, curiosity, the consultant in me went deep down into the research. That was my next step, to really understand the research around it. And I kind of looked at them and I was like, oh my God, right? Because a lot of the guys, I think there was 2 of us Asian women that were going through that in class, and the rest were African-American. One was of South Asian descent. And I couldn't articulate it as an Asian woman to really understand what that is. Because you always hear a lot about, African-American and what those injustices are because of the history in the United States. But no one really talks about Asian and the complexities around it.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting. Around the same time your book was coming out, we had what happened with George Floyd. We had that took center stage, and for good reason, of course. But you probably have people watching this right now and listening going, you know what? Okay, you're in these big time organizations, right? I get that these things happen. Where does human resources fall into play? What about HR? Can't they do it? But I think it's kind of all, and I have friends in HR too. It's a very noble profession, but especially in the public sector, you can talk to it a little bit. They're all everybody's influenced by the leader at the top. So I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but HR isn't always there to protect the employee. There's still repercussions, even if going to someone like HR and having those conversations?
Sure. I think there's a couple dimensions. In a corporate level, it comes down to the culture of the company.
Right.
And to your point, in that culture of the company comes down so much with the leadership, right? Even the more reason why I'd advocate for the representation and leadership of diverse people, right? Because you need people to pound the table for us, for other people so that we can lift as we climb and really like help articulate the unique nuances of, that people of color and diverse people are going through, right? Even related to gender. So that's one aspect of it. And, a lot of times you had DEI, HR, there's been a rise around like DEI initiatives in corporations, especially after George Floyd and API hate. And the really question is like, is it a genuine conversation? And a lot of times it's not. It's a checkbox in compliance. And so when you even look at that in the dimension of the law, right? And this is what we kind of looked at, right? The law protects you, HR protects you, the rules and regulations within a company protect you. But how you decide that you're going to exercise that, there are repercussions for that.
Absolutely.
So the reason why none of us decided to go down the litigation path is that as soon as we filed, it would be of public record that, we filed. So what does that mean for future employment, future careers, whether we decide to stay or not stay within the company? Like those are all of the dimensions. It is going to be a matter of public record, whether you're standing on the right side of history and wrong history. You have to go live through that life as well. And so that was one of the reasons why I never pursued the legal action, because I didn't want the repercussions to prohibit me from further opportunities in my career to get blacklisted around that.
Yeah. And I think I'm glad you brought that up, because there's rules and regulations, sure, but then there's the reality of the situation and the reality of life. And I think you talk about the blacklisting, and it's very, very real. I think we both know people that have gone through that, you yourself, but it's crazy. Let's say you win the lawsuit, you have your job, you're never looked at the same again.
Correct.
So you kind of had to be prepared, even if you went through that, to leave the company anyway.
Yeah. And I think it's harder when you're talking about the dimensions of DEI, right? Because the kind of evidence that you're looking for is really not hardcore evidence, unless there really is hardcore evidence of like brutal violence and pictures that you've kind of come in. It's hard, right? It becomes like there is still a dimension. Is it a personality thing? All these stuff. And the dimensions of stereotypes, et cetera, start to come into play to that. And it's really tough. And so what you actually find, and statistically as well, like with the research, most of those, DEI type of cases happen with younger people, right? Early in their careers, where they can really kind of monetize to it and they're okay with it. But you don't hear a lot of people who are much more further in their career or senior executives do that, because the repercussions are much greater.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are just the facts. I mean, those are not the things you learn, in school, in the textbook. And those are just things that you have to kind of figure out through life. And I know we're running up on time here, but I do want to, before we get out of here today, I do want to bring up, speaking of textbooks, your new partnership with UC Irvine. I believe you're going to have a book signing on May 8th from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific time on the campus of UC Irvine. Obviously, if they stay tuned to your page, they'll get more information on that. But obviously a great opportunity to promote your book. But I think this was a deeper connection for you. You're actually now on the Dean's Leadership Council of the Graduate Division there with Dean Jillian Hayes. But I think that's kind of where I met you, to be very frank. But I think it's really interesting the path you're going down, because it's bigger for you. You want to spread that message, excuse me. And I think the education system in America is a perfect way to spread that. I mean, these are where our young people grow up and where they get the foundation to hopefully go out and do great things in this world. So can you talk about why it's so important for you to kind of get involved in higher education and spread this message?
Yeah, I know. There's a couple of different dimensions around it. One is, I think in order to have the next group of leaders and strong leaders in corporate America, I think you need to start with the education of the younger generation and start to develop really strong leaders. And I think academia is a great place to do that. Why UC Irvine? Gosh, one is it's my backyard, and I really want to do something to be able to add value to the community that I live in. And that's really important to me, to give back. too is like the population of UC Irvine, like 70% are first generation. That's a really, really big deal. And I think as an immigrant and, you know, to this country, that I think that there's a lot of like my story that really can help that population. I think there's two other reasons I think very personal, right? For me, one is like, I have really close people around me that graduated from UC Irvine. And, you know, there, a lot of them are first generation, and I see the success that they have in their careers, and they wouldn't be who they are if they wasn't afforded the opportunity to go to UC Irvine. And I think that there's something really special around that. And I think for me, it's like, you know, how do I continue to pay that forward and pay that back, you know, just with the people that I love and again, for my community. And then, I mean, Jillian has also become a really good friend of mine. So there is that personal connection as well with Dean Hayes. So, and how do I help support her, and our community as well? So, really excited about the partnership at UC Irvine, and just really excited to be able to lend my expertise and my experience as well to, you know, build stronger leaders and be able to help other people, right, in their rise.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, and you know, all the connections you've made through this journey, and you mentioned it before, but you've met so many people that have been in your position, and that you've traded stories. But in a way, it's like, okay, well, all these voices are stronger than one, but you all have different versions of your story, but you're telling the same story. And I think the more people you can get your personal story out to, the more hopefully this issue is going to be amplified. So
yeah, and I think just to end on that note, right? I think one common message is that that people are saying thank you for having the courage to use my voice and speak out, because I think a lot of people really didn't know how to do this. And I think where I am is just, I'm encouraging people and women and people to really band together around this, wrap our arms around each other and lift together, right? Because we can't create that change if we stay silent or allow ourselves to be silenced. And, you know, unless we have these conversations to really pound the table and advocate for each other and advocate for the change that we want, we're not going to see it.
Very well said. Christine, it really was a pleasure getting to talk with you today. And for all of you that enjoyed this conversation, stay tuned to this page. Christine's got a lot of content and doing a lot of great things. And I'll tell you what, I would keep my eye on where you go in the next few years. I think you're doing a lot of great things for this space, and we appreciate you. It's great speaking to you today.
Awesome. Thank you so much.